Thank you. We're starting just a couple of minutes late, but as I am moderating the closing session, and the closing session is going to be me doing a big recap, or not a big recap, get some viewpoints from all of you who've participated in this conference. We can use that time, still finish at 3:45 without running too late. Now, we have such a unique opportunity here of having the Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Adel al-Jubeir, with us, that we want to make sure we make the most of our half hour that we have, our 30 minutes. And the Foreign Minister's kindly agreed to make this more of a conversation, because I think that way we will be able to get to a lot of the issues. Foreign Minister, I will ask a few questions, we'll have a conversation. I will invite a few of our participants and guests here, obviously, to maybe come in with some questions as well at the end. This is on the record, just so everyone knows. This is a session that we'll hold on the record. We will explain to you before that the title of this conference as a whole is big. In the Balance, the Future of World Order or Disorder. This is an opportunity for Chatham House to go beyond the very targeted conferences we normally hold into climate change or the future of the trade system in Europe or Eurozone, and to go into a much bigger thought. And we have a very international audience here, people from all over the world, the idea being that we'd like to get different perspectives. And so I think it's a great opportunity for them to hear from you today some of the big priorities for Saudi Arabia. We had Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, opening the conference yesterday. He focused very much, as it happened, on North Korea and on the Iran deal. And to my reading at least, he was linking those two things somewhat together, talking about the importance of the NPT as a structure that's made risks of nuclear war in the world, put it to one side. He described it, we've avoided, thanks to the NPT, we've avoided the Mexican standoff or the last scene from Reservoir Dogs. So you have to know that particular bit of where all the folks have a gun pointed at each other's heads. So I suppose the question I wanted to start with for you is to pull off the Foreign Secretary's remarks here yesterday and just find out from your perspective, as Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, how you saw President Trump's decision not to recertify the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement with Iran. Some people were worried he might decertify it. As I understand, he's sort of not certified it. He's thrown the responsibility to Congress. We know that prior to the agreement, the Saudi government was highly suspicious of this agreement, concerned about its implications. However, my impression has been, with it there, you know, you've been willing to live with it. Now, do you see this as re-injecting some instability, added instability to the region, or a fair step to take at this point? Where do you come at it from?
Well, thank you for having me. It's always a great pleasure to be here. Let me first, if you allow me, talk about the broader issue in terms of the world. I'm optimistic enough to believe in human ingenuity and to believe in human adaptability. I think that our world is going through tremendous changes that have to do with the information revolution, with technology, with social media, with interdependence. And I think that we truly have become a global village. What happens in one part of the world can have an immediate impact halfway around the world, and we have to find a way to deal with it and to adjust to it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity, and I think the world will come out of it once we go through this adjustment process in a much better position than we were prior to entering it. Every time you go through periods of change, inevitably you have some instability, and I think that's what we're seeing. But we're not seeing the end of the world. It's not there. We're seeing the beginning of a new world, and hopefully a better world, and a more resilient world, and a stronger world. With regards to the issue of the Iran nuclear agreement, we always maintained that if an agreement will prevent Iran from ever acquiring a nuclear capability, if an agreement has ironclad inspections mechanisms, and if an agreement has snapback provisions in case Iran violates it, that we would not be opposed to it. This is what we were assured of when the agreement was made. But then what happened is we realized that Iran took advantage of the resources it got in order to fund its nefarious activities in the region. We saw Iran stepping up its aggressive behavior in the region, whether in Syria, whether in Iraq, whether in Yemen, whether in Pakistan, Afghanistan, whether in Africa, by using the income it generated in order to fund its exporting of its revolution. So that's not good. The agreement, as you said, as we studied it more, we realized there are weaknesses in it. Initially, there was supposed to be no enrichment. Iran was allowed to keep some enrichment capability. There's no limit on Iran's ability to conduct research, and there's a sunset provision after 12 years from the signing of the agreement that would lift any restriction on how much centrifuges Iran can operate, which basically means their research capabilities will be enhanced, their income is enhanced, and in 10 years there's no limit on how much they can enrich, which means they can set up 50,000 or 100,000 centrifuges and create enough material for a bomb within weeks. That's not good. So we have a problem with inspections that need to be tighter. That should include military and non-declared sites. We have a problem with the sunset provisions, and I think that's the position that President Trump articulated, and we're very supportive of it. He has also made it clear that Iran must be held accountable for its support of terrorism and for its ballistic missile program. And that's something that we have been advocating for many years, and so we're very supportive of it. We believe that the Iranians need to understand that they cannot continue business as usual with death and destruction in the region. The behavior that they've exhibited in the past, funding terrorism, supporting terrorism, blowing up embassies, attacking embassies, trying to interfering in the affairs of other countries is not acceptable, and that there will be consequences to the Iranians. And this is what President Trump has said, and we are very supportive of this, I believe, as well as our allies in the region.
The agreement, as I understand it, has, as you yourself said, sunset clauses. If at the end of those sunset clauses, Iran were to restart actions that look like they could lead to it acquiring a nuclear military capability, I presume the international community could go back and reimpose sanctions as they had done before. So is it that the agreement is fundamentally flawed because it has a sunset clause, or are not the, as they call them, snapback mechanisms and the capacity at the end of the agreement to go back to another agreement, are those not sufficient protections? Or were you hoping that the agreement somehow would spill over as well to its broader regional activities?
It has to. It has to. People are worried about Iran with a nuclear weapon. If they're causing all this mischief without nuclear weapon, what would they do if they had the bomb? The issue of should there be a sunset provision and the limits on enrichment are removed, and Iran has the capability to enrich enough material for a bomb within a matter of weeks, that's very dangerous. And so, with all due respect, when people say the international community can come back and put more sanctions, by the time they're done condemning Iran, Iran will already have enough material for a bomb. And by the time you get around to imposing sanctions on Iran, they will have a second bomb. And by the time the sanctions have any impact, they could have a dozen bombs. So theoretically, yes, but practically, no.
But if one were to scrap the agreement today or allow it to lapse somehow, it's still going to take 1 or 2 years. It will be done unilaterally if it were done by the United States. It won't have the support, probably, of the EU, probably of China and Russia, probably, in which case you're also going to end up in a situation where this would take a long time. I'm trying to understand what could be gained from allowing an agreement, as imperfect as it may seem, but one at least that buys time to simply recreate the moment of instability that existed prior to the agreement again today.
Yes, I believe, and I wouldn't be presumptuous to speak for the Trump administration, but I believe the position of the Trump administration is that the agreement has to be improved, that the agreement is weak as it is now, in particular with regards to the sunset provision and with regards to inspections, that Iran must be held accountable for its nefarious actions outside of this agreement if we want this agreement to have any importance. I believe that the not certifying has to do with Iran's overall behavior, including the shortcomings of this deal. And I believe that that's the objective. There are efforts underway as we speak in the US Congress to impose sanctions on Iran with regard to its support for terrorism and with regard to its ballistic missile program. And I think those will proceed, and the international community needs to support those in order to send a very strong message to Iran that your behavior, your nefarious activities have consequences.
As we're talking, we're a conference of big ideas here, let me ask you maybe an unfair question, but if you look ahead 10 years' time, 15 years' time maximum, do you think we will still only have 8 or 9 countries with nuclear weapons capability in the world, as Boris Johnson pointed out yesterday, one of the great successes, as he said, of the NPT? Or do you think we're almost inevitably on a slippery slope to a broader use of nuclear weapons to guarantee country security around the world, including in your region?
I think if we can stop the Iranians from ever acquiring nuclear weapons, it will go a long way towards stopping the proliferation, in particular in our region. Because if Iran acquires a nuclear capability, there are other countries in the region that will seek a similar capability, and then the genie's out of the bottle.
Let me turn quickly, as we have so little time, and each of these issues could be worth a whole half an hour in themselves. On Iraq, there was a meeting, as I understand, yesterday, I think you hosted, maybe yesterday or the day before, Secretary Tillerson, and discussed in particular how to stabilize Iraq after this extensive period of trying to eject ISIS, after it seems that the government seems to have controlled at least the Kurdish situation to a certain extent. This must obviously be an incredibly important country from a Saudi perspective, given the risk that if it were to collapse in some form, the kind of challenges that were posed on your border. What can you offer, do you think, Saudi Arabia to Iraq? What can its neighbors offer in the GCC more broadly that's going to help at this time? Is it about security? Is it economic aid? And what are you looking for in return?
Iraq is a neighboring country. Iraq is a country with which we have historic ties, familial ties, tribal ties. We are both Arab countries. We're both oil exporters. The problem we had in the past was the political system in Iraq was not friendly to Saudi Arabia in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And then we had Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait, and then we had the American invasion of Iraq. So the closeness of Saudis and Iraqis, we have families who migrated from the Arabian Peninsula centuries ago to Iraq, and many of them came back after the third Saudi state was established by King Abdulaziz. And so many of our prominent families have ties, very personal ties with Iraq. Many of the tribes in the Arabian Peninsula extend into Iraq and vice versa. So the closeness of our ties with Iraq on a human level are much closer than what we had at the political level. We have made a decision, the custodian of the two holy mosques, that we want to engage Iraq and open up to Iraq. And so we began a series of visits, high-level visits. And we established the Saudi-Iraqi Coordinating Council, where we want to institutionalize the relationship. We opened up border crossings. We established commercial airline links. We're opening up a second consulate in Najaf and another one in Basra. We are we have trade shows. As we speak, the Saudi Arabia has an expo in Baghdad. We want to coordinate with Iraq on all levels. And we believe that this will contribute to stability and security in the region, as well as help Iraq. We want to invest in Iraq. Iraq is a very wealthy country. Iraq has no need for aid. Iraq needs investments, and Iraq needs to rebuild after a very difficult period of time that they went through since the invasion, Saddam's invasion of Kuwait, and then exacerbated by the fight with Daesh. So we want to be their partners, and we want to put the relationship at the level that we believe it should be, which is a very high, very strategic level.
And can you do that when you're, I presume, going to have to share that influence and that engagement and that desire to invest in it with Iran? In a way, this is a country that what Saudi Arabia and Iran will both be trying to help?
Iraq is an Arab country. Iraq is a Gulf country. Iran is not an Arab country. Our interests in Iraq are to have the best ties with them. Iran's interest in Iraq is to dominate, not to provide good. We want to help Iraq recover and regain its standing internationally. Iran wants to dominate Iraq. So it's completely different agendas. We support all Iraqis. We don't look at them in terms of sects or ethnicities, and we try to work with all Iraqis for the benefit of a unified Iraq in which all of its ethnic groups and nationalistic groups and religious groups have the same rights.
I mean, again, we could spend a lot longer time on this, and don't have time here. I think Iraq's obviously has had its sectarian conflicts within it itself, and we'll have to work out how they manage them going forward. Let me just turn, though, to Syria, because here we are at this moment where ISIS is being defeated, pushed out of Mosul, now pushed out of Raqqa as well. Looking at it from the outside, many people will conclude, yes, ISIS is being defeated, but it means that Bashar al-Assad is going to remain in power. That in the end, stability will dominate. We use the word Trump. Stability will trump the need for justice. And is this just the reality that you as well in Riyadh and you and the government in Saudi Arabia are arriving at? I know there's been a lot of discussions with Russia as well that is trying to find a sort of balance for a stable Syria over the long term. Rebuilding has to start at some point. At what point does one say, you know, stability is more important than the justice that would be required for all those victims of Assad's campaigns?
I think you can have both. We have a Geneva Declaration. We have UN Security Council Resolution 2254 that all of the countries in the region, including Russia, support. We are trying to work with the Syrian opposition to broaden its participation to include the Cairo groups and the Moscow groups so that they can have one unified position. And we're trying to relaunch the Geneva process, the political process, so that the Syrians can negotiate with the Syrians on what the future of Syria should look like. And so we don't think that this is impossible to do. And I think the Russian position is also the same. We have an interest in maintaining the territorial integrity of Syria. We have an interest in maintaining the institutions of the Syrian state so that we don't have a vacuum and the institutions collapse and we have a vacuum. We have an interest in maintaining the rights of all ethnic groups in Syria. And we have an interest in helping Syria move towards a better, more stable future. And so I think that's pretty much the consensus among the international community. The challenge is, how do we bring it about? And this is what we will be exploring in subsequent meetings.
Okay, there will be intense, I'm sure, meetings. And one more point, and then I want to open it up and give people a chance here to ask a few questions or make a few points. The dispute, the boycott now of Qatar in response to its unwillingness to meet the demands that yourselves, Bahrain, Egypt, have made. This is, how do you see this playing out? We know that the United States at least has been trying to play a brokering role along with the Kuwaiti government to try to find a way to break it down. I mean, are we down now to a situation where there are certain 3 or 4 red lines? There were a number of steps that the Qatari government was meant to undertake in order for it to be able to recover normal relations, economic relations in particular, with its Gulf neighbors. But as you look ahead, where are we on that journey? Are we as far today as we were back in June when the boycott was first declared? Has progress been made? You know, having another conflict in the region is hardly helpful, as you will, of course, appreciate at this time. What can you tell the group here about where things stand?
It all lies with Qatar. We are saying no to supporting terrorism, no to funding terrorism, no to harboring fugitives and wanted terrorists, no to incitement and hate speech, no to the interference in the affairs of other countries. We find it unacceptable that media platforms would be used to justify suicide bombings by senior religious figures. That doesn't help when we're trying to combat extremism and terrorism. We find it unacceptable that terror financiers who are on United Nations lists and US lists, forget our list, are operating freely in Qatar. That's not acceptable. And so we took the steps that we took. We find it unacceptable that the Qataris would provide citizenship to citizens of other countries so they can leave their countries and come to Qatar. You don't do this. You don't engage in efforts to destabilize countries in the region. What interest is gained in doing so by the Qataris? We came to a point in 2013, 2014 where we said enough and we recalled our ambassadors. The Qataris agreed to take a series of steps and they didn't implement. So now we said enough is enough. You've got to change your ways if you want to be a normal country. This is dangerous for you, as well as it is for us. We have no interest in punishing Qatar. We want Qatar to change its ways. The problem we have is we have a country that's in denial. They don't believe they have a problem. And as a consequence, they don't believe they have to fix it. But what have the Qataris done since we took the steps that we took? They have signed an MOU with the US on terror financing, which they had refused in the past. They have now American Treasury officials in their banking system, which they had refused in the past. They've changed their laws in order to allow the introduction of evidence provided by foreign governments, which they had refused in the past. They have begun to, as a consequence of this action, Hamas gave up the Gaza Strip and handed it over to the Palestinian Authority. This is all good. And so we expect, as this goes forward, that the Qataris will recognize that they have a problem and they will go into introspection and deal with the problem. This is not about humiliating anyone. This is about getting somebody to do the right thing.
But you would argue then, if I'm trying to hear this carefully, some progress has been made, if not enough. Is that what I heard through that list?
It depends on what they do now that they've changed their laws. Are they going to convict people and imprison them? What are they going to do with the Muslim Brotherhood individuals who are fugitives from Egypt? Are they going to keep them there? Or are they going to deport them? So there are a number of things that the Qataris have to take. And the most important one is this problem cannot be fixed unless there is an acknowledgement that there is a problem that needs to be fixed.
But on this problem needing to be fixed, let me make this the last point, and I want to bring people in. We did have at Chatham House a month or two ago the Qatari foreign minister come and speak, and we did have Dr. Gargash then speak, who's here as well, a week later, just trying to understand for members of Chatham House the two perspectives here. The point I remember is that you say that they need to understand they have a problem. What I understood from the Qatari side is they think you have a problem and that the rest of the Arab world has a problem if they do not recognize some of the aspirations that are political in some cases, as represented perhaps by Muslim Brotherhood groups or other forms of political Islam, that somehow what they're trying to resist is a model that's going to try to damp down popular expectations but will lead them to exploding at some point in the future. And they've been used, one might argue, by some governments, including in the West, quite often, to try to explore conversations with those groups, hence having so many people, as you said, yes, in Doha. I presume you would reject this idea that there's a problem that in a way you're storing up, I say you, that the Gulf community is broadly storing up by trying to sort of repress some of those political aspirations. You reject that?
Yes, I think the problem is broader than just the Muslim Brotherhood. The problem is terrorism. The problem is terror financing. The problem is harboring individuals who are wanted for financing terrorism. The problem is not bringing them to justice. The problem is interfering in the affairs of other countries and trying to destabilize them. You don't do this if you want people to deal with you as a good neighbor. We in Saudi Arabia have a problem. We acknowledged it, and we dealt with it. We have zero tolerance when it comes to extremism. We have zero tolerance when it comes to terror financing. We have revamped our charities. We have changed our banking systems. We have looked at our education system. We have stopped extremists from preaching, and we punish them when they do. That's recognizing you have a problem and dealing with it. The Qataris are still in denial. They don't think they have a problem, so they talk about different things and they try to shift the subject. We're under siege. There is no siege. Do you see Saudi airplanes flying over Qatari airspace? Do you see Saudi warships blockading Qatari ports? No. It's just a boycott. We do not want to deal with you so long as you continue with this behavior. If you want to be a good neighbor, and we hope you will be, then change your behavior and do the right thing.
I've got a couple more points I can make, but I'll get 2 or 3 comments in because I think we have such limited time, and I can keep track if you don't mind, Foreign Minister. There's 2 questions here which I'll take, and I'm looking around there as well, but a few cropping up there. If you go please to the middle of that row. Yeah, you first, and then we'll go to Amina afterwards. You introduce yourself, please. Yeah.
Your full namesake Adel, Hamezia, University of Oxford and SOAS. Following on from the last points on the Gulf crisis, the Qatar crisis, earlier this afternoon, I think it was this morning, at the Future Investment Initiative, we heard about this great announcement of NEOM Special Economic Zone, which is likely to span 3 countries, Saudi Arabia, Jordan and Egypt, 26,000 kilometers squared. Following this sort of capricious move, perhaps, according to some commentators on Qatar, from a political risk perspective, what would you say to investors looking in at a project like this? Of course, I'd love it to succeed, but from a sort of realist perspective, what do we say to investors at a time when such matters can move on? And a slight question, that was more of a comment. Saudi Arabia does great things on aid, one of the highest military expenditure countries as a percentage of GDP. I'd like you to say a little bit on what Saudi does from a soft power perspective beyond aid in the developing world, and what MOFA and sort of your
those
partner.
are big questions. Mina, I'm keeping track as well.
Thank you. Mina Al-Araybi, the National. Marhaba. I just want to ask you about Iraq, a follow-up question, because the timing is so important when it comes to Iraq. So the vision you have for this relationship for Iraq in terms of stability for the Arab world, how you see Iraq's place in that, and why this timing, and the impact of the Kurdistan referendum and the tensions we're seeing inside of Iraq, please.
Okay, I'm just going to get two more here, and then we'll stop, and then I'll let you take them as quickly as you wish.
Let me just write it down.
Well. Yeah, and
I'm getting old.
Yep, just hold on a second. Yeah, exactly, because we've got the first one was about, how does
investor
one
confidence
follow through on the investment promises, given the political risk, something on soft power versus military spending, and then the Iraq question so far. Yeah, please. Can we have the microphone on this one here? Keep speaking. No, we'll bring you another microphone. Hold on. Thank you, sorry again.
Your Excellency, do you agree with the observers that the continuation of the Gulf crisis is weakening the Gulf countries in front of Iran? And also, is it the continuation of the same crisis also is affecting the counter-terrorism efforts in the region? My last question is about the recent criticism from the Prime Minister of Iraq, who criticized Rex Tillerson, the Foreign Secretary of the United States, about his remarks about the Iranian-backed militias, asking them to go home or something like that. Do you see that the Prime Minister Abbadi criticism to the Secretary of the State, United States Secretary of the State, is a setback actually from the effort that has been done and achieved in Saudi Arabia recently?
Iranian-backed militias, I got the end of that one.
Yeah.
Last question, the gentleman there. Yep.
Hello, Alistair Smout from Reuters. I was just wondering if you could see any circumstances where you wouldn't IPO Saudi Aramco, and if you'd held any discussions about selling stakes directly to sovereign wealth funds, maybe China or anyone else. Thanks.
Okay.
I know how professional you are in taking questions, distilling your answers down into haikus almost, but your time is the one we have to manage.
We'll try. With regards to investor confidence, I think that Saudi Arabia has a huge economy, very good balance sheets. We have good infrastructure. We have a young population and large market. This Red Sea project is an incredible project that will take many decades to play out and will be a source of prosperity and revenue for Saudi Arabia. We're trying to diversify our economy away from oil, and we will. We're trying to create a society in which there is innovation, in which the energy of our youth is unleashed, in which we have accountable, transparent, efficient government. We want to open up new areas of investment, both domestic and foreign investment. We want to be a partner with the world. As we speak, the world's largest gathering of fund managers is taking place in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where we are looking at what investment opportunities are there for the future. Robotics, artificial intelligence. Where's the next wave that we can be a part of? And also to showcase the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia as a destination for investment. So I have no worry about the investor confidence. The Qatar issue is very small. It's a non-issue. We are dealing with huge issues. We're dealing with transforming a country. We're dealing with transforming a region. We're dealing with the challenge of Iran. We're dealing with the challenge of extremism and terrorism. We're dealing with Syria. We're dealing with helping Iraq. We're dealing with Yemen. We're dealing with stabilizing Libya. All these issues are much, much more important than Qatar. The Qatar issue is very small. The Qataris have to take certain steps and change their behavior and stop doing things that undermine what we all are trying to do, and things will return to normal. But the notion that this is hampering the Gulf or helping Iran, we don't subscribe to. The issue of Iran being stronger vis-à-vis the GCC. Quite the contrary. I think the other side, if we can change Qatar's behavior, we in the GCC will be much stronger in confronting not only Iran, but extremism and terrorism. With regards to Iraq's role in the future of the Middle East, Iraq has been a key country for centuries. Iraq has been the Iraq of the Abbasid Empire, has been a model to the world in terms of science and literature and achievement and progress. And every Arab and every Muslim is very proud of our Iraqi heritage, because that's part of who we are, and we want Iraq to have play its natural role in the region as a key country in the Arab and the Islamic world, and as a partner of ours. And we stand ready to work with Iraq in this area. The issue of Kurdistan is unfortunate, and we believe it should be resolved through dialogue within the framework of the Iraqi constitution. And we are prepared to work with all Iraqis in trying to facilitate this in order to bring them together. We don't believe that the tensions are going to be are helpful to Iraq in the present or in the future, and we think that the issues that are outstanding or that may be outstanding between the Kurdish areas and Baghdad can be resolved through dialogue and can be resolved within the constitution. Now, with regards to the
soft power would be one.
The soft power in Saudi Arabia is and has been for many decades one of the world's largest provider of assistance to other countries. Through the Saudi Development Fund, we provide soft loans, we provide developmental assistance. We also do it on a direct basis. We have given more than the percentage recommended by the United Nations in terms of foreign aid. I believe we have been, for many, many years, the number 2 donor after the United States, even though our economy is a fraction the size of the US economy. And we do that because we want to be helpful to countries. We have also a role to play in the Islamic world in terms of facilitating the ability of people to come and perform Hajj and Umrah, and we take that responsibility very seriously. So this is what we are, and now we want to lead by being an innovative, progressive, dynamic society by implementing our Vision 2030, where I said earlier we want to be able. We have 70% of our population is under the age of 30. They have hopes, dreams, and ambitions. We want to help them achieve those hopes, dreams, and ambitions. We want them to be innovative, dynamic. We want them to produce energy and jobs and take the country to a much higher level than we are now. And this can be done if we empower women, if we make our government more transparent and more accountable and more efficient, and if we create the environment and the atmosphere in which our population can excel. And this is what we're doing as we speak. And so go back to your original question of investor confidence. I believe investors are looking at Saudi Arabia now and saying, much more dynamic, much more visionary, much more on the go. The vision that Saudi Arabia has is aligned with the policy that it is pursuing. And I would expect that investor confidence skyrockets, not goes down. When we tried to float, and we did, a bond offering, I believe it was oversubscribed 3 or 4 times, which indicates the confidence that investors have in Saudi Arabia.
Do you want to say something about the IPO or not last, or would you rather?
The IPO, I'm the Foreign Affairs Minister. We don't do IPOs. But what I can say, and this is really not my expertise, is that the decision has been made that we will go with the IPO in order to float the shares of Aramco, and there are discussions in terms of where and so forth, but I think in terms of the decision and the timeline, that's pretty much set.
I'm going to do one last question to you because it will segue to our final panel, which is going to go straight after this. So when the Foreign Minister has to leave, I'd please ask you to stay in your seat so we can flow straight through. But this is a conference, as we said, about world order. How do you think, how essential is America's role still in the stability, the future security of your region? Is it as indispensable as it was before? Is it more of a shared security you're looking for now? What's changed, do you think, in the last 2 to 5 years?
I think the US role in terms of security in the Middle East is indispensable.
Indispensable.
Indispensable. If America is engaged in the region is more secure. If America is disengaged in the region becomes unstable. Vacuums are created, evil forces flow into those vacuums, and it costs us many, many times to reverse it than it would have been to stay put. I think where we started about the changes in the global system, I think we have a situation where the US is the largest country in the world in terms of its footprint. The US is also the world's #1 superpower. The US understands that it has a role to play and must play in the international system. But the world has to understand that America cannot carry the burden of maintaining order in the international system. And so there has to be burden sharing. We know that in the Gulf. In Saudi Arabia, in the Emirates, we are partners, we pay our own way, and we know that we have a responsibility to do this. I think you cannot cut defense spending in Europe, expect the US to increase defense spending in order to maintain order in the world, and when the US doesn't increase defense spending, people complain about vacuums being created. This has to be a partnership. And I talked about how the world is changing because of the technology and because of the internet and because of all the things that are happening, and part of that change will have to be a realignment of the partnership between the US and its allies in a positive way to where everybody assumes their share of responsibility. The UK has an interest in a stable world. Germany has an interest in a stable world. Saudi Arabia has an interest in a stable world. We are a huge investor in the world. We are the world's largest exporter of crude. We have the 2 holy places, which gives us access to 1.5 billion Muslims. If the world system suffers, we suffer. So we have an interest in stability. And in order to further those interests, we have always carried our burden. And I think that realignment has to come with ways of seeing how the partnership can be made more efficient. I don't believe the US is retreating. I don't believe the US has an interest in retreating. I think that the US, quite the contrary, President Trump believes in America playing its role in the world. But he also believes that allies have to carry their fair share in helping with this world. And I think it makes for a better and stronger partnership all around. So that's where I would end up.
Thank you very much for making that comment, because it will serve as a perfect segue to the next panel. Thank you very much, Foreign Secretary, Foreign Minister, for making the time to come and participate, share your views with this panel. It's really helped kind of bookend the event after the Foreign Secretary, British Foreign Secretary's participation yesterday. Look forward to keeping in touch. Could you please give a very strong hand.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Please stay in your seats while we get the chairs on.